Okay. So, Kirba, I think you have to share the screen. I don't see others here. So, is it fine for you to share your screen?
So we are going to continue from yesterday.
Yeah. So, like, if you're okay to share your screen, like post taking few of the concepts, maybe you can share your screen to continue with the studies coding part.
Yeah, okay, then fine.
So let me share my screen. I want you guys to do one more assignment today by in the end of the class. It's basically on the loop basis, very simple one. So I'll also request you to create an account in the Hacker Earth or Hacker Rank so that you can start doing some practices on the logical parts. So I'll do confirm that by the end of the class. So today let's step into the class now. So any questions till now, wherever we have taken, or you have any clarifications or questions? If there are no questions, I can continue ahead, right? Okay. So yesterday we learned like for every programming, we need to have something called package. So your package looks with the keyword package followed by your package name. Okay. And you have learned about the util package yesterday. So we didn't explore much on the scanner class. So let's do that. Let's complete that. So yesterday we just experienced about the next method, which actually accepts only your string data. But if you wanted to give some kind of input which are based on different data types, then the scanner class is providing the relevant methods. So have you guys explored that? Like, did you got chance to look into the scanner class methods?
No, we didn't explore that scanner class, I
Oh,
guess.
yeah, okay, fine. So what we can do is let's explore that now. Because for the online bank app, when we are trying to take the dynamic data, we are going to use the scanner class. So let me use this. So right now, let me give the value as a string and see what is scanner returning as in turn. So I actually didn't give any string here, so that is the thing. I didn't understand. Okay, now. So if you see here, you get an exception, input mismatch exception, because you're actually trying to get an integer, but I passed an input of string. So if you're using the relevant methods and you're not passing the actual data, we end up with runtime exceptions like this. So so what is exception is basically right now you can understand exception is something it's not as per your code. Like if it's not processing as per your code, you get some kind of error. Like sometimes with before execution of your program, if you get those errors, they're called compile time errors. Like before executing that, if you get something after execution, those are called runtime errors. So this is a kind of a runtime error, and we are expecting an integer, but we have got string. So this is some kind of expected format of errors which we need to handle when we are building programs. And you learn the exceptions down the line another two classes. So before that, just understand, like if you're since Java is very case sensitive, it will also accept your data as you are writing your code. If you're not giving the freedom to expect some kind of code, then it will throw you exceptions, and you need to handle them if you are expecting some kind of data which the user can give in that format, but you need to handle it explicitly. Then in that case, you can have those exceptions to handle such scenarios as well. So right now this doesn't work. So let me go ahead and give an integer. So this executes fine. What if I give my float value? you still again get your input mismatch, because for float type, we have something called as next float. And if you're accepting that, you will be able to get the positive output. So Java is very case sensitive. So be careful whenever you're planning your data types for the relevant attributes. It has to be very clear. Don't try to manipulate often. But there is a way you can actually do a manipulation. Like for example, if you're getting a string here and in turn you wanted to do a integer value, you want to get an integer value from it, those kind of operations can be done, but not for all scenarios. So in respective to scanner class, you have to be very direct. What type of data type value are you expecting from the user? And you have to declare that kind of methods here. So this is what a scanner class. And why do we need scanner classes? Basically to get the data dynamically in your core Java, basically in a systematic way. If you want to get your inputs dynamically, you can go ahead with the scanner classes. There are multiple ways for you to get your data. There is a way you can read the data from a file or get the data from a file or in a format of Excel file. That there are multiple ways, but right now it's basically we are expecting the user to give as we are asking like a question and answer method. In that case, we can go with the scanner class. So apart from this, like yesterday we saw three kinds of looping concepts. One is while, and the other one is for loop, and other one is do while. So you guys remember the syntax for for loop? Can anyone say me that?
For initialization, condition,
Okay.
incrementation or decrementation.
Okay, the supporting condition or the expression to it. Okay, any expression it can be. So basically in Java, we have something called as enhanced for loop. So basically, if you are pretty sure that you're going to use this particular object and you're going to do your logic, then we can go ahead with enhanced for loop. So basically, enhanced for loop is preferably used for your objects rather than your logical conditions. Okay. So basically, let's say I have a students, like I have like 10 students with me. So out of this 10 students, I'm going to get each student name and I'm going to print each student's name. So for that purpose, what if I'm going with the traditional method, I need to create int I equal to 0, I less than or equal to 10, and I plus plus. And within that, I need to say like, I need to get the list of the respective student object, right? So right now I'm telling I have the students. This is a list, okay? Like consider like a group, a list of value, okay? Don't get confused now. So here what I'll do is when I'm going to print my SOP, I'll be telling like get the student. So student is my object. Within that, I'm going to give some kind of value called I and then print them. So what is this? How will system understand if I'm giving in a square brace? For that purpose, we got something called a different data type called arrays. Okay, so arrays are something basically same data type, but they are grouped together. So if you're taking integer and if you're having like 10 number of values in an integer ranging from 1, 4, 5, 6, and it goes on till 100, right? So if you're having a range of values of similar data type, then we can express them through something called arrays in Java. So for that purpose, we use this symbol, which is nothing but the square. So how exactly do we need to define this array? So arrays are actually two ways you can declare. They're also literally called as your class, or they can also act as your primitive types. So for both class objects as well as for primitive types, we can use this arrays. There is no constraint for you to use only for primitive types. Say for example, if I'm creating a variable int x equal to 10. So this is a usual variable declaration. If I want to create an array declaration, there's something we have called, we have a syntax, and how we need to go ahead with that array creation is something we need to know. So before going to array, you would have heard about this matrices, right? So have you come across that matrix or any kind of max concepts you have heard earlier, right? Please adjust with my word diagram. Okay. So let's take. So can someone say what is row here and what is a column here?
So horizontal ones are rows,
Okay.
vertical ones are columns.
Okay. So these are something called as row. So we can say R1 and we have something called R2. And similarly, if you want to go ahead here, we have something called C1.
I think you're doing it in different order.
Couldn't get you?
So R1 should come there wherever you're typing.
Yeah. Sorry, this is my typo error. C1 and this is C2. So basically, if you have a database table or if you're going for a higher level of programming practices, what we do is we preferably use this kind of arrays. Why do we need arrays? So arrays is something like you have a similar name and you're grouping n number of elements into that array. So for creating this array, it's similar to your object creation. So if you're creating a student array, right? I can say student, I'm creating an array of 5 students. So if I'm going to create, I'm going to give 5 as my list. So there are like two kinds of things. One is one-dimensional array. Another one is two-dimensional array. So what is the difference between one-dimensional array and two-dimensional array? So something like if you have this X and Y axis, like kind of a matrix information, we preferably go with two-dimensional array. So if you wanted to access this particular element, right? If you have some data here and if you have some data here. So if I want to fetch it, I need to have X and Y. So basically it's kind of a graph where you need to dependent on two values and only then you will be able to get the relevant data. Whereas in one-dimensional array, you don't need to have specifically like a matrix, but you're going to fetch it kind of single column. So how does that single column look like? So this would be your usual single one-dimensional array. So here your indexes would be, this is always your array position, right? In your Java starts with 0. So basically your address starts with 0. Even here your address would be R0 or R1, you can say. And this is again with your index 0. So, and it goes on till your n minus 1. What is this n? So n is nothing but your length. So what is your actual value you're planning to create your object, or how many values you're going to store in that array of values. So if I'm going to store a student of 5 values, my length n, if it's n equal to 5, then my total array of values would be like ranging from 0 to 4. So 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. So these are the 5 values you are dependent on, and your index position, like where you can fetch it from. So these are the address list. So 0 to 4 are your address and the total elements are 5. Okay. So basically your ranging starts from 0 in terms of arrays. So basically if you're creating any kind of object in Java, it has its own address which is defined by the system. But in array concept, the memory address will be again created by the JVM, but you can access it with the relevant index or the position using this particular value. And if you're having length of 5, your range starts from 0 to 4. So this you have to be very clear. And coming to back to the one-dimensional array. So this one-dimensional array creation would be like any data type. The syntax would be like any data type followed by the relevant name, whatever variable name you're planning to give, and then the relevant square bracket and semicolon. This would be the one-dimensional array syntax. So basically a variable name creation. How do you give your variable name? Int x, right? Same thing you're going to give, but followed by a square bracket would be a way to initialize your array. But how can I give my actual value to array? To do that, we need to again come up with our object creation syntax. So whenever you create your object, you give student s equal to new student, right? So this would be your actual object creation. Similarly, if you're trying to create a integer array, so int and int array equal to new, and here I need to give the relevant data type with the size of 5. So if you're giving your size, you can actually have your square bracket after your object gets created. If you're just initializing, then you should have like int array this. So if you're initializing, you should have it here. If you're creating, you need to provide the relevant size, because whatever size you define, only then the array will create the relevant memory here, or the size or the space in your stack. Otherwise, it will not create the relevant size. It will be just a variable name. That's it. It won't create any size for your array part. So whenever you create this size, right now it is having 5 elements. So immediately it will create this particular array called as int array with the size of 5, ranging from 0 to this particular 4 will be your last index position. So this is the way you can create your array. So to create your array or to define your value, you need to again use the new keyword, new operator, and then you have to create this syntax. So the syntax for your array creation would be your data type and the relevant variable name equal to new keyword and the same data type, because array is a collection of homogeneous collection. So similar data type. You can't give a float data type here. It will give you a syntactical error, compile time error. And post that, you have to predefinedly give your size. So if you're giving 5 and if you're trying to add one more element of index here instead of 4, if you're trying to give one more element with index 5, the Java will not understand. It will throw you an error. You define me as length 5, but you're trying to give an element of 6th position, which is I'm not aware of. That is the reason I'm throwing you an exception. So Java is very particular about whatever you define. So whatever you declare here, that has to be very accurate. Otherwise, the system will not process it. So this is the one-dimensional array. So let's see how this one-dimensional array works. So I'm going to create int array. So int, I'm going to create a variable name. Okay. Equal to new int of 5. So it's still throwing me an error. Why is it so? What am I missing in my syntax? Can someone say me what am I missing? Any guesses? You're able to see the error here?
Maybe after variable name, you need
Yes.
to give an.
So whenever you're declaring it as an array type, it expects your array either here or either near your variable name. Okay, so you can give either in your data type or near variable name. If you're not giving that, and if you're giving just defining the size of that array, it will not accept. It will still consider it as a normal data, normal variable declaration. So to make it as an array, you have to either give the array near the data type or near the variable name. Only then this would be considered as your int array. And once you define it, let's now check the int array dot length. So I'm just checking the length of this particular array, whatever we have created. So you can see 5. So the length is 5 because the size is 5. So if you're trying to assign some value, it's an int is an array. So now I'm going to give the value int array. I'm going to define the index 0 and give some value as 40. And I'm going to define one more index, say 4, and give some value as 50. And let me print that again. So if you want to access that particular positioned value, you have to just define that value and get it. So let me print it again.
You have given 1 instead of 4.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, so if we are not defining any value in our index, right? So we are using int data type. Int's default value is 0. So it will take it as 0. Unless if you're defining some value, only then you'll have some value populated in that particular place. So the arrays, if you're using the array for your primitive data types, it will take your default values. If you're using your array for your object related thing, then it will take null as your default value. If you're not defining anything, it will take it as null. And now let's see, like right now I'm assigning the value one by one, right? What if I'm having 100, my index size, the total size is 100, and I want to assign values for overall 100 elements, and I want to retrieve all the 100 elements and print it. I can't go and every time print like a int array of 95 or int array of 94. I can't go and give every time this particular value. To make it simple, we have done something called loops yesterday, right? So we can use that loops to iterate your array, the group of array, and print them. So for that purpose, let us say like for int x equal to 0, x less than, so let me reframe this back to 5. So my particular size of this particular one is 5. So if I'm not sure like what will be the array, and I want to make it the program common wherever it's getting coming, right? Wherever the int array is, I don't want to validate based on the value. I make it as constant 5. I want to fetch it from the array. In that case, I can just use this variable int array, and this has a property called length. I can get the length directly from the particular variable instead of hard coding it as 5. So it's always better practice if you're actually creating a loop, and instead of your hard coding it as 5 or 10 based on the value, you can actually fetch it from the variable length itself. And then I'm giving I plus plus. And within this, now I'm gonna print my all array values. And to print all array values, what is the array name? This is the array name, int array. So I'm going to fetch the value from this particular array based on the index, based on the index. So here my index is nothing but this is the count. So instead of giving a 0, 1, 2, and 3 explicitly by myself, I'm going to use this for loop and then take that particular index position from my initialized value x. Now if I print it, you will be able to see so if you see, leave the first two syslabs, so the first three, then you can see here 0, 40, 0, 0, 0, and 50. So I have initialized the zeros element and the fourth element. So 40 starts and then ends with 50, and rest all elements where I haven't passed any value, it is defaulted with int's default value 0. So these are the 5 elements. So basically, why do we need for loop? So we can give for loop if you're having any one singular condition to evaluate, or if you want to retrieve the data from a group of elements based on its index using, if for example, right now you learned array. So if you want to retrieve the element based on that index, then you can go ahead. Now I'm giving one more condition within that. If my index, right? If my index x is equal to 3. Okay. If my x is equal to 3, I'm giving system.out.println 3. And I'm not giving any other condition, just I'm evaluating based on this condition. So here, let's again run. So if you see here, when my index value got incremented, that is when it comes to third value, that is before 50, I am able to print a value as 3. So basically, you can actually bring all your conditions within your loop as well. Whenever you have such business logic. Say example, now yesterday we had a condition for withdrawal. So the withdrawal condition is initially, it should be greater than 0. And we should also evaluate whether the value withdrawing is equal to the balance amount or less than balance amount and not greater than balance amount. So in that case, a person can withdraw per day only 3 times and not more than that. And every time he withdraws, we need to negotiate that value from the actual balance. And we wanted to give the relevant message if he's exceeding the limit count. In that case, what we can do is whenever he comes in, we need to make a count of that particular user. He has come once and he has done the withdrawal for the first time for the day. And then all these values can be maintained using some count variable or any type of variable. So int flag equal to 0. So whenever the person comes and then does a withdrawal, I'm going to increment this value to 1. And I'm giving a maximum limit of withdrawal only 3. And the minimum is 1. So whenever he comes and goes for the 4th time of withdrawal, I'm going to give him the message that you can't withdraw for today. Please try tomorrow. Some kind of message I'm going to give him in the deposit or the withdrawal message. So there, if I wanted to iterate his things, then I can go with if condition, or you can also go with for loop condition based on your use case logic, which you're going to build it up. So any questions or so far in the one-dimensional array? You just learned the syntax and how to retrieve the element from that particular array. So any questions so far here? Yes or no?
Neha, 1 minute, can you scroll down to the for loop?
Okay.
In the output, first we are getting the length as 5. Then we are printing int array 0 and 4th one as 50. Okay.
No. First,
Then,
you're getting this length as 5. The second one, you're
okay.
assigning the index 0 with 40. So you're getting the 40. And then you're assigning the 4th element as, and I'm printing the same. So I'm getting as 50. So this condition is done. Then I'm doing an iteration where I'm doing with 0 index. So again, it starts with 40. The second index, 3rd and 4th will not have any value because I haven't assigned the value anywhere. So you'll get 0. And then I'm giving a condition if my x becomes 3, I'm printing it as 3. So on iteration, when x comes 3, then I'm printing this 3. And finally, when it comes to the final index 4, I'm printing it as 50.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So now you learned about the array creation and then the accessing of that or retrieving of that particular element, right? So the next one would be your multi-dimensional array. So how is multi-dimensional array is going to be created? For that, we have the syntax like int. I'm giving int 2d equal to new int. So whenever you're giving a 2-dimensional array, right, you need to give 2 arrays. Why do we need 2 arrays? Because we have x, the row and the column. So if you want to retrieve this particular, the row has to be 0 and the column has to be 0. If I'm going to retrieve the value from here, my row has to be 2 and my column has to be 2. So based on this particular column and row position, I'm going to retrieve the value. Earlier, it was just only 1 index. So we were able to get it based on 1 value, 1 index. But in case of multi-dimensional, we need to have the 2 indexes, one for your row and one for your column. So that is the reason whenever you're creating a 2-dimensional or a multi-dimensional array, you need to have 2 attributes, 2 square brackets, where the 2 square brackets indicate your row and column. Say example, if I'm giving my 2 and here if I'm giving 3, this becomes a 2 by 3 matrix. If I'm giving 2 here, it becomes 2 by 2 matrix. The first one will always define your row and the second one will always define your column. So now, if I'm going to pass some values out of this, right? So I can go ahead. So in this, right, if I'm giving only 1, will it accept or not? Or do I need to just give like this? Or like this?
So we are getting the
One
warning.
square bracket is required.
So you can see the error. So if you are using a two-dimensional array, right, you need to migrate to two arrays, or you have to give separate array, like separate elements. So suppose if I'm not giving this two-dimensional, this would have been considered correct way of to syntax. If I'm using two-dimensional array, the single array will not accept. So you have to pass your two dimensions of square brackets as a syntax. So it can be either near your variable or near your data type. And you can create even for your object. So right now I have only bank account. Okay. So if I'm going to create that, I can say bank account array, bank accounts equal to new bank account of 4. I can even create the array for my object or my class. I can create even for my class. And if I want to retrieve that particular one, I can still retrieve bank accounts of 1 and get the data. So basically, this is kind of an object creation. So that is the reason we are still able to use it for your class as well. So there is no restriction that your arrays has to be used only for your primitive data types. You can use it for any kind of data types, to your classes or to your objects or to any kind of inputs, any type of data types. So are we good here? I don't want to go into multidimensional array right now, but basically why I have bought this concept is if you are having a group of similar elements, then you can use this array. So we'll be explicitly learning and doing some programs on one-dimensional and two-dimensional by tomorrow. But right now, just understand what is array and what would be the initial syntax to create your array, and to retrieve or access, how do you use your for loop. This should be enough for right now. And the next one, we need to go ahead on the loops part. We need to learn another 3 concepts. One is your switch case. The other one is your break, what this break keyword does. Another one is your continue keyword. So if we are good with these terms and the for loops and a basic analysis, we should be able to write a decent program using all these concepts. So then we can go ahead with arrays and play around. So let's go into the switch case part. So what is the switch case? What do you understand from the switch case? Any idea like what you're able to guess it from switch case?
So switch case is a control branching statement. Like based on the matching condition, it will switch the control to any one of the case statements.
Yeah, even we can do that in if case also, right? Then why do we need explicitly a switch case?
Readability. So if else it will go nested, right? So
yeah.
switch case would be more readable compared to if else, nested if else.
Yeah, true. Okay. So basically, when we learned yesterday about if and else block, right? Similarly, we can write the same logic using switch case, but the structure changes little bit. So the syntax for the switch case would be like switch and then the relevant expression. This would be your expression. So within that, you can give a keyword called case, and which can hold some constant. Okay, it can hold any type of constant. And within that constant, you can have any statement, the line piece of code which you want to execute, or any method you want to call over here. It can be anything. It can be any type of logic here. And every time when your case is completed, you need to provide a keyword called break. So what this break does? So example, if you have, like, let's say the switch case is basically on days. So here I'm saying if my case is Saturday, right? If my case is Saturday, and if I'm Saturday, I'm saying like insys.out.println, it's a leave. Okay, and if it's a Monday, right? I'm saying it's a working day. So even if you're writing an if else if conditions, right? In if the day is equal to Saturday, then I'll print leave. Else if the case my day is equal to Monday, I'll again say working day. But they you have to write multiple if blocks, and every time you need to use the keywords called if and then followed by else, if with a number of conditions, and then you have to wrap it up with one more else block. So here the line number of lines you write are more. Basically both that's the same thing, you're going to get the same output. But why do we prefer the switch case is basically when you have multiple scenarios, or when you have very limited scenarios. For example, if it goes for weekdays, you know there are only 7 days and you can handle them within this particular switch case. Say if some value which is out of your condition, you never knew what it comes, but there's some kind of range, some kind of expression that only you're evaluating true or false kind of situations. In that case, you can't go ahead with switch case. For that purpose, we go with our if blocks or if else blocks. So basically the switch is again similar to your if else if, but it can evaluate the piece of code based on your situation. So say example, this is only one statement. It can't execute all. So basically out of these multiple cases, only one case will be successful. If none of these cases get successful, we give the default value. Okay, we say like default, not defined. Something I'm defining as not defined within my SOP. And I'm giving the break. What if I'm not giving the break? So it will continue as an infinite loop. So it will not break, it will continue for a long time because it will not match with any kind of situation. If you're not giving this break, if I'm not giving this break in any of the cases, my switch case will be checking. It is like an infinite loop. It goes checks. Nothing will be satisfied and it won't break there. So always when you're going for a switch case flow, make sure that you're using this break keyword. The break keyword is basically this particular condition is done. Either it satisfies or not satisfies. We are going to complete this flow here. If you're not using this keyword, it will still continue with the next flow. For that purpose, we should use this break keyword. Okay, so any questions here on the switch case? We'll do a real-time example now on switch case, but any questions so far? So right now you're learning the concepts which are related to Java 1.5, which is lesser than Java 8. Okay. So post Java 7, we were able to give this particular switch case with the string related information. Like earlier it was accepting only a character, but later from Java 7, they made it more feasible by having a string also as a part of this particular case criteria. So we will explore that. If anyone is having less than Java 8 version, right, they can experience it. If not, you can try by in any online editors and online executions like online compilers with Java 7, you can just try with this flow where you can try to give a string and see what is happening, what is Java is returning in turn. You can just give a try on that because Java 8 accepts this particular case with string, but earlier it was not accepting. If you're learning or writing the certifications, make sure like how the switch case works. There might be multiple programs coming out on this particular switch case topic if you're writing your certification. Okay, so still we have only a minute. We'll rejoin and then do the hands-on on the switch case part. Can we all join the second invite?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you.